Is Marvel Rivals matchmaking rigged? That's the question that's been plaguing the community for the last few months and has recently gotten more traction due to a new Reddit post that dropped yesterday. So let's read it and talk about the truth behind Rivals' matchmaking system. The post is titled, "Yes, the matchmaking is rigged and it's fascinating." They start the post saying, "As a data scientist, I've spent some time looking into the matchmaking algorithm of this game to determine whether or not matchmaking is actually fair. To start, this game is developed by NetEase, who have also made a variety of battle royales and mobile gacha games in the past. At the start of 2024, they released a research paper detailing their modern matchmaking algorithm. The most important line is in the abstract. They pulled a quote saying, "Matchmaking is a core task in esports and online games, as it contributes to player engagement and further influence the game's lifecycle. Previous methods focus on creating fair games at all times. They divide players into different tiers based on skill levels and only select players from the same tier for each game. Though this strategy can ensure fair matchmaking, it is not always good for player engagement." Now, this research paper was released in March of 2024 before Rivals was even released, but also while it was still in development. So it's safe to say that they likely took the information they gathered and used it when making the algorithm for this game. They could have pulled from other games that used a skill-based matchmaking system, or Apex Legends, which uses an engagement-optimized matchmaking system. The Reddit post goes on and says this is not the first time an engagement-based model has been developed for a multiplayer game. It originated in Apex Legends, developed by Respawn and EA, and was given the name EOMM, or Engagement Optimized Matchmaking. In that game, there exists a concept of scheduled wins and scheduled losses. Instead of providing a completely balanced elo-based matchmaking at all times, their system will sometimes place players in servers that are either far beyond their skill level or far below it. The idea is that feeding players wins even when they aren't deserving of one keeps them engaged and more likely to spend money in the future. Now, I do know that Apex actually has this system in place, but I don't think I've ever once seen it happen. I know people that have never won a game of Apex in their life, or have only won like 2 games ever, and they have hours on the game. So maybe it's just not working as intended, or that's just how it's supposed to work. That's besides the point though. The point is that these systems do exist. There is a skill-based matchmaking system like something like Call of Duty uses, or this engagement optimized matchmaking that prioritizes keeping players engaged and wanting to spend more money. The post goes on to question whether this is a skill issue and says to some extent, yes. From the start, matchmaking places players in skill buckets based on their early performance in online play. So whenever you first boot up Marvel Rivals, if you're doing really well, they'll place you in a higher skill bucket. If you're doing really bad, they'll place you in a lower skill bucket, is what I can assume that means. They say the very best players, the top 10%, are good enough that they can solo carry and overcome stomps consistently. According to NetEase R&D, these players are most sensitive to churn, so matchmaking prioritizes finding fair games for them. And they say to keep in mind that these players are often streamers, so from a PR standpoint, it is best to keep those players entertained and not complaining about the game. Which, if this is how that works, then that is 100% true. If you have people like Tim the Tatman, Necros, all of these big streamers playing the game, but they're not having fun and they're just shitting on the matchmaking system and calling it horrible, then they're just not going to keep playing the game, and that leads to a lot less promotion that Marvel Rivals is getting for essentially free. So, in their mind, if they let these players get really good matches at all times, then people will enjoy the game more and want to go try out the game. They then say that the other 90% of players are at the mercy of the algorithm that they are claiming is in the game. The posting goes on to say that team diffs aren't really team diffs. They said one really interesting section of the first report I linked is their analysis of NBA player team composition and how they extrapolate their data into their matchmaking logic. Without going into diffusion models, this sets the groundwork for how team composition can be fixed from the start. In NBA terms, you would want to pair a playmaker like LeBron James with spot-up shooters like J.R. Smith or Kyle Korver. In Rivals, you would want to pair a Rocket main with a Punisher or a Bucky pre-patch. Well, imagine that they can. Their algo can take into account each player's main character, their preferred role, and their synergies with other players' mains. That match you queued into with 4 insta-lock DPS at the selection screen, that's by design. Sometimes they flex, sometimes they don't, but if a player spends 80% of their time playing Hawkeye, they're probably not going to do too well when forced to play as a tank. At times, they won't swap at all, and you end up with 3 DPS and 1 tank on defense. It's the these small placements that can steer the outcomes of games before they even happen. And the final note is that short matches are better than long matches. They said from their research, short decisive matches retain players longer than drawn out fights that end in overtime. If you open up your recent matches, pay attention to how many games end in 6 to 7 minutes compared to ones that last over 20 minutes. Based on their data, players tend to log off when suffering a loss in a longer game. Shorter losses, even blatant stops, are easier to mentally shake off, which helps player retention. And I actually have my competitive history pulled up here, and my last 8 matches, only 2 of them were under 10 minutes. The rest were above, with most of them being about 15 minutes or more. And I will say before anyone says here, no, I have not been having a good season this time around. It's going horrible for me. Climbing has been hell. And so after reading this post and doing some more research by watching videos others have posted, analyzing and going in depth about the system, I've essentially come to the conclusion that no, the system is not rigged in the sense of them forcing you to lose or editing damage numbers for your matches that way they can ensure you actually lose that match. Instead, it's rigged in a way that will place you on teams that are likely going to get stomped by the other team, either because that team is on the higher end of your skill bracket so you'll just lose, or because the team you got on is going to insta-lock DPS and throw the match, or they just don't know how to play any other role. However, even with them doing this, if they actually are, you can still overcome and win matches you were otherwise supposed to lose. So no, I don't necessarily think matchmaking is rigged in a way to force you to lose, but it surely can feel that way if they are actually placing you on teams that are meant to lose. Of course, though, I would love to hear what you all think, so please leave a comment down below and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Bye now.